right. Well, good evening, everyone. I think we'll get started. Um, Thank you for joining us um, for our virtual public meeting on the CAT Transit Strategic Plan. This meeting is one of two that is being offered this spring to share information on the Transit Strategic Plan. Both meetings will have the same agenda and content. We'd like to note that this meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be posted online in the next few days following the meeting. My name is Nick Adamo. I am a member of the consultant team that is supporting CATS on the Transit Strategic Plan. We are joined tonight by Garland Williams, Director of CAT, and Ben Chambers, Transportation Planning Manager for the City of Charlottesville. Thank you again for joining us, and let's get started. We will start tonight's meeting with an overview of the Transit Strategic Plan project, including a summary of the work we have conducted and completed to date. We will then shift to the bulk of our meeting today, which will focus on the components of the draft Transit Strategic Plan that is now available for public comment and eventual City Council consideration for adoption. We will then touch on next steps, any questions you may have about the project, process, or the draft document. Today's virtual public meeting is being held on the Zoom platform. And to maximize the quality of this meeting for all participants, your video and audio is disabled by default. We ask that you use the built-in question and answer feature to ask your questions as they come up throughout our presentation or once we reach our question and answer session at the end of the meeting. If you would prefer to verbalize your question for the team, you may use the raise hand feature, and the project team will unmute you when it is your turn. If you are dialed in over the phone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Captions are also available on this meeting and can be enabled by clicking the Show Captions button on your toolbar. The team here will answer as many questions as we can during our time together this evening. If you have specific comments about the draft Transit Strategic Plan that you would like to share as part of the official public comment period, we ask that you please do so online via our official feedback form available on CAT's website. We will share more information on how to share your comments online at the end of this meeting. And again, please note that this meeting is being recorded and the recording will be made available online. Before we get started, again, we are joined by Director Williams, and Garland would like to invite you to make any opening remarks you may have for the group.
Thank you, Nick. Just wanted to say thank you for everyone who's taking your time to help us through this process. We are close to the finish line, so your input is very needed and necessary for us to get it across the finish line. I hope what you'll see and notice is there's been a lot of thought put into this process to make the system as best as we possibly can, to make CAT the best small transit urban system that we possibly can. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Nick.
Thanks, Garland. We'll now provide you with a brief overview of the Transit Strategic Plan project. Transit strategic plans are required for all transit agencies in the Commonwealth of Virginia that are operating in what we refer to as urbanized areas. These plans are developed based on approved guidelines by the Commonwealth Transportation Board through an overall process that is overseen by the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation. Once complete, the Transit Strategic Plan will serve as a blueprint of sorts for CAT in the years ahead, the next 10 years to be exact, with an emphasis on the provision of transit service, operations, and capital and equipment needs. The new Transit Strategic Plan will take the place of CAT's 2018 Transit Development Plan as the key future-looking document that will guide CAT service over the next 10 years. The CAT team has completed lots of work over the past year or so, including an initial phase of public and stakeholder outreach last summer. During that phase, we conducted an online public survey that yielded over 500 responses about current conditions and priorities for improvements. CAT has also convened a working group of community and regional stakeholders to help guide the development of this plan to ensure that it reflects the needs of our growing and diverse community. We have also collaborated with frontline CAT staff who know our routes and the needs of our customers the best, our bus drivers and operators, to further inform the development of the plan and our recommendations. This feedback from riders and the community, our staff, has been paired with technical data and demographic data to help us assess existing conditions and chart a path for our recommended improvements. We heard and learned a lot from the community over the course of this project, including what priorities for improvements to the system are, why people choose to ride the bus today, and what destinations people are going to. We have found that the top priorities of riders in the community include more frequent service, expanded areas of service, and longer hours of operation, both during the week and on weekends. These results have influenced the recommendations that we are proposing to include in the plan. As part of our outreach to the community, we also found it important to understand why people might not be riding the bus, to learn how we can make the system more attractive, not just for current riders, but potential future riders as well. Here, we also learned that frequency of service, where service goes in the community, is important to attracting new riders who don't currently use CAT. In addition to our public and stakeholder outreach and engagement, the team has been hard at work developing the plan itself. The Transit Strategic Plan includes 5 distinct chapters that include an overview of the existing system, an analysis of existing system performance, planned improvements and changes to the service, as well as a plan for implementation and financing. All of these separate chapters are combined to make up the draft Transit Strategic Plan that is now available for public review and comment. With that, we will now walk through more about what you can expect within the actual draft document itself. As we noted before, the Transit Strategic Plan will create a blueprint of sorts that will help CAT plan for and implement improvements over the next 10 years. Again, this is legislatively mandated by the state government and is also required to be eligible for state funding. So this is very important for CAT, of course, to help fund all the great things we are planning to do in the future. It is also providing kind of a framework and a process and a forecast for future funding requests. Really important to note that what is in this draft plan that will eventually become final and approved by City Council and sent to the Department of Rail and Public Transportation, the contents of this plan are not binding. The plan is designed to be flexible and can be adjusted in future updates. Flexibility is very important for CAT and transit agencies across the Commonwealth and the country, given ongoing efforts at the local and regional level to improve the system. Things that are plaguing transit systems across the country, like bus driver shortages, evolving needs of funding, and other ongoing considerations such as fare payment and fleet technology. And after this Transit Strategic Plan is finalized, CAT will submit annual written updates, minor updates, to the Department of Rail and Public Transportation every year, and will conduct a more minor full document update every 5 years. So this cadence really allows us to keep the plan fresh and responsive to the needs of the community. As I noted earlier, the plan is made up of 5 distinct chapters. Chapter 1 is a system overview and a strategic vision, really lays out what CAT's goals and visions are for the future as a transit agency and organization. Chapter 2 has a lot of insightful data on the performance of the existing system, things like ridership, as well as a lot of analysis of demographics in the community to see how well the service is serving our community today. Chapter 3, 4, and 5 will be the focus of what we walk you through this evening. Chapter 3, laying out all of the actual tangible improvements to routes and service and frequency that we plan to phase in over the next 10 years. Chapter 4 is implementation plan. It lays out things like vehicle purchase needs and other infrastructure needs to make this plan a reality. Finally, Chapter 5 is a financing plan that details how all this will be paid for. Starting with our planned improvements, this makes up Chapter 3 of the Transit Strategic Plan. We have crafted 40 service improvements to really take the system to the next level over the next 10 years. You may recall that CAT has been leading the way on several other planning efforts in the past, mainly the 2021 System Optimization Plan. There's also been a regional transit vision plan developed by the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission that was released in 2022. Both of these past planning efforts have developed a suite of recommendations that this transit strategic plan does take into account. So the planned improvements you will see in this draft plan, we're not starting from scratch. We've taken the really good planning work that has been done in the past, not wanting to reinvent the wheel and really making sure that those recommendations are embodied in this plan and eligible for future funding requests and eventual implementation. Our service improvements are divided into 3 timeframes: short term in the next 1 to 4 years, midterm in the next 4 to 8 years, and long term in the next 8 to 10 years. That spans fiscal years 2025 to fiscal year 2034, excuse me. The state guidelines around the development of these transit strategic plans tell us that they need to be fiscally constrained, which means that we can only include improvements that we can reasonably expect funding for. There are a number of unconstrained improvements, we call them, things that we would love to do, but we don't quite have the resources for just yet. We want to make sure those are captured and documented as things progress and evolve into the future. So you'll see these unconstrained projects and efforts reflected in the plan as well. Here we have a very high-level summary of what you can expect in the short-term bucket of improvements. This includes kind of our most targeted and most low-hanging fruits, so to speak, to enhance service in the near term, really focusing on serving existing and new areas with the highest ridership potential. We are proposing to update route alignments, basically the streets that the buses run on, to better serve our community. Improve frequencies. We heard from our customers and stakeholders that frequency is the most important element in being able to choose to take transit and rely on transit. So that is a real underpinning of all our recommendations. In the short term, we will also continue the pilot project of the MicroCat on-demand microtransit service, which was started last year, and we'll continue to monitor and evaluate that in its pilot phase. At the end of this short-term window, at the end of the 4-year mark, the vast majority of recommendations from CAT's 2021 System Optimization Plan will have been realized. And with all those improvements in place, there will be a 30% increase in service compared to today. One example of the improvements in this short-term bucket of recommendations is splitting the existing Route 2 into 2 patterns to better serve various areas around those corridors. In the midterm, 4 to 8 years out, we will continue updating route alignments, improving weekday frequencies even more. We'll also start to improve weekend frequencies, including the reintroduction of Sunday service. With all these midterm improvements in place, it will complete the implementation of CAT's System Optimization Plan from 2021. It will also begin to implement the Regional Transit Vision Plan recommendations in this time frame. And at the end of our midterm window of improvements, at the end of that 8-year timeframe, service will increase by 70% compared to today. And shown on the screen here is just one example of those midterm improvements, realigning the Route 9. And finally, in the long term, 8 to 10 years out, we will further improve weekday frequencies so that all routes have frequencies of every 30 minutes or better. Continue to improve weekend frequencies and have Sunday service implemented on every route that has a matching hours of operation to that of Saturday service for consistent weekend service across the system. All in all, these long-term recommendations will continue to make progress on the Regional Transit Vision Plan recommendations. And at the end of that 10-year timeframe, we will have 110% more service out on the streets than we do today. As I noted before, there are certain improvements that we're calling unconstrained, essentially things we don't quite foresee the resources for yet, but things we want to document and keep on the forefront of our minds as more resources become available. This includes additional improvements to frequency for weekend service, even more Sunday service, additional realignments to where the routes run or extensions to reach further into the community with certain routes, as well as potentially expanding microtransit to other areas in the city and region. The examples of what you just heard, we refer to as our service recommendations, basically how we're improving the provision of service itself. There are also a number of other topics that we are recommending for future study, consideration, and assessment. Things that aim to enhance the customer experience, continue to evaluate CAT's fare policy, whether or not fares are reintroduced or the system remains fare-free. Adjustments to internal processes like monitoring performance, regional coordination, and continued implementation of those regional transit plan elements with our partners across the region. So shifting from what you will see in Chapter 3 to what you will see in Chapter 4 are our infrastructure and implementation considerations. With all of these improvements that we've charted out for the next 10 years, CAT will need approximately 74 new buses over the 10-year timeframe to make all this service run. This includes the replacement of buses that CAT currently has, as well as the purchase of new buses. Of course, with more service and more frequency, CAT will need more buses than it currently has. So this 74 number includes replacement and that expansion. Really important to note that CAT has made great strides in advancing its zero emissions fleet, and consistent with other CAT planning efforts in City Council decisions, all replacement and expansion bus vehicles purchased in 2027 and beyond will be exclusively zero emissions vehicles. There are a number of capital projects on the horizon for CAT that you can see in the blue box here, including installation of more bus shelters across the system, as well as some early environmental and engineering work for expanding CAT's operations facility to accommodate that future zero emissions fleet. Moving from Chapter 4 to Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is our financial considerations. As I noted before, the Commonwealth requires that all the recommendations we include in this plan be fiscally constrained. charting out the funding and the resources that CAT can reasonably expect into the future and making our recommendations fit within that expected funding. Really important to note that all of our recommendations and our plans strive to maximize the use of external federal, state, and regional funding sources to get the biggest bang for our buck and really be the most efficient with our resources. Also important to note that we are planning for quite robust service increases, and that will prompt the need for more operational funding from our partners and our jurisdictions. And most importantly, the completion of this plan and submission to the Department of Rail and Public Transportation is a requirement to be eligible for that future state funding. The funding landscape for CAT is about to shift quite a bit. CAT is currently the recipient of a Department of Rail and Public Transportation TRIP, Transit Ridership Incentive Program grant, that is currently funding the fare free service that is out on the system today. That program and that grant funding for CAT is expiring in 2025. We're also seeing the end of federal COVID relief or CARES Act funding that will, again, kind of develop a gap for us that we need to fill with more local funding and state funding to continue the provision of existing service and expand into the future. So those are some of the details to keep in mind as you review and comment on the draft transit strategic plan. We'll now aim to leave you with what you can expect in the weeks ahead and get into answering your questions. So the submission to the Commonwealth and the Department of Rail and Public Transportation is a deadline of June 30th. Last month, we convened our stakeholder groups. We've met with the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission's Regional Transit Partnership, really, seeking our stakeholders' help in spreading the word and giving us their comments. Here in May, we find ourselves in our public comment period for the published draft transit strategic plan. And in June, we will take your feedbacks and your comments, update and finalize the transit strategic plan, and put that in front of City Council for their consideration for adoption. One of the requirements from the Department of Rail and Public Transportation is that the plan be adopted by the transit agency's governing board, and with CAT being an extension of the city government, City Council is essentially CAT's governing board. So we will seek their consideration for adoption on June 30th, and that will set us up well for submission to DRPT by the end of the month. So the draft plan is available online for review and comment. We are just in the early days of our 4-week public review and comment period that is running through the end of the month. You can find the draft plan online at CAT's website. We also have an online feedback form, a survey of sorts, to collect your comments and really help us understand what you might like or what you might like to see changed as part of this draft plan before we finalize it. Tonight's virtual public meeting is one of 2 that we're offering. Again, it will be the same content and agenda at each. We're just trying to make multiple times and days available for the community to learn more. And we are looking ahead to June 3rd City Council meeting to discuss this with Council and seek their consideration for adoption. Thank you all very much for your attendance and interest in the Transit Strategic Plan. With that, we can shift to any questions that this group might have. I'm seeing one already in the question and answer box from Louise. The question reads, have you considered the idea of having live bus location tracking and sharing that information with customers via an app? I've seen that in other cities, apps called something like Where's My Bus? If customers have more confidence that they know when their bus will arrive, it can increase ridership. Great question, Louise. I'll ask Ben or Garland to advise on any ongoing efforts in that real-time tracking regard. That is not a specific element of the transit strategic plan, but of course, very, very important for the overall system.
Yeah, sure. So, Garland, you go ahead.
I was going to say, Ben was probably going to say the same thing I was, that we are looking at improving all of our technology. Real-time tracking is an important component of it. Our AVL and CAD AVL system needs an upgrade that's coming to an end of its life basically next year. With that said, that is the time that we will be petitioning the state and the feds for potentially upgrading that technology and putting in a real live tracker into our app system. So it is on the horizon within the next 1 to 2 years. Next year, when we, like I said, when we come to an end of life, then we'll be able to apply. Hopefully we get it funded, and then we will start that process.
Thank you, Garland. Also seeing another question here that Ben, you answered, but I'll verbalize it just for the good of the group. Does this plan consider forecasts for population growth and where that growth might be over the course of the next 10 years? The answer is yes, and those population and employment trends and growth projections can be found in Chapter 2 of the plan. And we also considered these trends and these projections as we developed our recommendations for service improvements in Chapter 3. Seeing a new question in here that reads, when will the new stop for the center be implemented? Garland or Ben, feel free to advise on that.
Yeah, the goal for us is to have the stop input, and we've been working with the city manager's office. Our goal is to have it in by January of 2025. It takes a little while. We're working through the realignment of all of our schedules right now. It's called a booking, and we gotta. It's more than just diverting the bus. It's also making sure that when we divert the bus and add additional time, that individuals using that route would also make their connections at Fashion Square Mall. So that's the piece that's kind of been holding us up. The consultants are actually working now to make that happen. And our goal is, like I said, to have it implemented by January.
Thank you, Garland. I see we have a raised hand from Franz. Franz, I've unmuted you. Can you hear us? Franz, if you can hear us, you should have the ability to unmute yourself now and ask your question.
Yes. Okay.
Great. Hi.
Right. Well, let's see. I'll start over again. I live about 3 blocks into Albemarle County, so I'm hoping that all of the things that will be happening sort of will cover the city and the county. I'm voting in the county, you know, stuff like that, without maybe a differentiation in any fees that get imposed, like if you do settle on fares and things like that again.
Yeah, so this includes service in the county as well as in the city. So it's all of CAT's service area, and that includes areas that are served currently by CAT in the county. And we're currently working, the city and the county are currently working together to talk about what transit governance is going to look like going forward. And so how will decisions about what goes in the county versus what doesn't go in the county How those decisions will be made, we'll have a better structure for that going forward. So that we will be making decisions together and not just, the county putting in requests for service to CAT.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Franz, for the question. All right, seeing another question in the Q&A box here. Have you ever considered running a bus to the airport at times that are well aligned with flight departure and arrival times? Airport service is something we've heard a lot about. So Garland, feel free to advise us on the concept of airport service.
Yeah, so currently, there's two transit systems, actually three transit systems in the greater Charlottesville region. There's CAT, there's UTS, and there's Jaunt. Today, Jaunt is the system that actually runs fixed route service to the airport. At this point, there has not been a request from the county for CAT to run service to the airport, but that potentially will change. We are having discussions about augmenting our system or even enhancing additional service to the airport. So I would say it's one of the things that is on everybody's radar, but there is limited service right now to the airport, but we're hopefully in the near future going to improve that.
Thank you, Garland. All right, Franz, I still see your hand raised. Perhaps that's a holdover from your original question. If you do have an additional question, feel free. But there it goes. Thank you, Franz. A new question in the chat. Can there be a stop added for Monticello? Garland or Ben, can you please advise us on how we kind of plan for and implement requests for new bus stops?
Monticello is a much more difficult one because of the location. Running a fixed route bus up to Monticello has severe challenges. School buses do it to bring kids up, that sort of thing, but having a transit style bus that's going to run up there, once every hour or once every 30 minutes, may cause some additional concerns for us, but that's not to say that we're not working with the county right now to consider adding service to Monticello. And more than likely, the service that we would add to connect to Monticello would be through the MicroCat product that we already have running in the county. That was one of the considerations. It was not put into their, they did phase 1 and phase 2. The Monticello component is in phase 3. The county's considering that now, and they'll be making a decision about adding that this time next year. So if you want that sort of service, I'd say it would probably be in everyone's interest to make sure that you express that. We will relay your comments, but make sure you express that to county officials to make sure that it stays on their radar. And I think it's also important to note that CAT isn't at a point where CAT makes decisions about service based on the jurisdictions that ask it to run service. So CAT is not really it's not an authority in the sense that it makes, all of the rules about where it's going to go. We have to have the authority to go and operate there, and someone has to pay for it. So really that's kind of the 1-2 step. We have to almost be invited and say, hey, we want you to run service this corridor or that corridor, and here's the funding to do so. Even when we were collecting fares, it wasn't enough to pay for an extension on services. So all of us need to really keep that in mind. And if we want additional services, we need to express that to the city council if it's in the city, and to the board of supervisors if it's in the county.
Thank you, Garland. Also saw another question in the chat that you just answered, Ben. As citizens, what can we do to help you get the funding you need? Great question that we very much appreciate. What you can do as a resident to support CAT is to ride as much as you can. Ben rightly noted that state funding is largely based on the size of the system as well as ridership. So advocating for a better system for us, you know, can go part of the way, but really showing that we have the ridership is an important metric that feeds into funding. Thanks, Ben.
I just want to piggyback off of that. I think Ben did a wonderful job in summarizing the answer, but I will go back to the previous statement I made. You really have to let the authority, the bodies that fund CAT, whether that's city council or the board of supervisors, know you want additional service. That's where it starts. That's where it gets funded, and that's how we make additional. We make plans to add additional service.
Thanks, Garland. All right, with that, it looks like we have gotten through all of our questions. So I'll put out a last call if anyone wants to raise their hand or drop something in the question and answer box. Happy to continue to discuss with you. If not, we thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate your time tonight and your interest in this very important project. And we look forward to reviewing your comments online on the draft transit strategic plan. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. And thanks again for joining. Take care.